up, guys? It's me, Bernie Fast, back here for another video. And today we're going to be playing Demon Fall and Bedwars. Let's get working.
Reviews video. When one of my mods informed me to go read the reviews for the Haribo Gummy Candy, Gold Bears Gummy Candy, 5-pound bag. So I went ahead and looked at it, right, like the product, you can see it here, it looks pretty normal, 5-pound bag of gummy bears, and, you know, right, we didn't think anything weird about it, until we find this review here, by Jeffrey Lambert, who gave it 1 star, and the title says, "Hell holds no surprises for me anymore." And I kind of glanced over this review a little bit, and let's just say that I was unprepared for the wild ride we were about to go on, so I decided to share it with you guys here today. So, here we go. The ultimate gummy bear review. Or maybe the worst, because it only got 1 star. I don't know. Let's go. This is a cautionary tale, and unlike most of the other reviews on this product, this is a true story, and its authenticity can be qualified by a small news item that appeared in the Toronto Star's local news section during the month of April in 2013, much to my chagrin, whatever. I would consider myself a prudent man, not given to bouts of outspokenness or craving attention, and certainly not one to rock the boat. On any given day, I can be found reading a crime novel on a park bench in the middle of the city, soaking in the opulence of nature while nibbling on my tuna fish sandwiches and fending off the voracious gulls and squirrels that threaten to spoil my repose. This is me, law-abiding and introspective, which is why it came as a shock to me to find myself incarcerated because of the devil's confectionery, Satan's sweetmeat, Lucifer's lozenges, the horror that is known as Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. I'll set the scene. It was late winter, early spring in Toronto, and the city had just been digging itself out of a late-season snowstorm. I was heading to Pearson International Airport for a red-eye flight to Amsterdam in order to give the Dutch arm of our company some training on the new software that had been installed. I'm deliberately being vague to prevent my place of work from being linked in any way to the incident that occurred. I had just finished packing, checked the time, and found I was running late. My flight was at 7:10 p.m. It was almost now 5 p.m. Cursing softly, I ran to the car and threw my bags into the trunk, hitting the gas a little harder than usual in my haste to make it to the long-term parking lot as soon as possible. Luckily, traffic was light on the 401, and I made it to the airport in record time, but I knew that my chances of making the flight were still at risk if I didn't use my time wisely. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and I was feeling a bit hungry, my stomach rumbling loudly in protestation, which caused me to look around at the other travelers rushing past me in the busy terminal, mortified that my bodily noises might be heard by others. I briskly checked my watch and decided I had enough time to grab a quick snack before going through the baggage check-in security, and would get something more substantial once I was through security. I spotted a vending machine nestled in the traffic corner of the terminal, and I was out my credit card and what I had a craving for, so to save time interacting with the my eyes scanned the colorful array of construction quickly. Rainbow-colored bag of gummy bears, a simple logo, emblazoned across and what appeared to be an always poetic with font. In my paused for a moment to underscore the importance of making proper choices. I was hungry. When you're hungry, you should eat food. Food is defined as a nutritious substance that makes people consume and maintain life. This is what food is. These days, the definition of the word food has been added, and the meaning has been broadened to include any material that can be digested, or rather, chewed and swallowed without causing death or severe illness. Haribo sugar-free gummy bears are not food. They are even from the planet. I imagine their origins being connected to the boardroom in hell by a top team of creative people, and with senior-level demons rubbing their hands together in ghoulish delight as the chemist slowly lifts the veil on the street. Point here being, I made a very cold choice. I pushed the button in the vending machine and ejected the brightly colored bag into my awaiting hands. I'd always liked gummy bears. They were bright, but rather innocuous, but they weren't overly sweet, and as to become cloying, and, of course, each candy came in the visage of a rather happy, docile bear reminiscent of the picture one's mind holds of all anthropomorphic bears from Yogi to Winnie. The way I figured it, I was taking a bit of holiday from life so I could relax from my fastidiously regimented daily schedule to allow for some frivolity. After all, I was going to be in
Alright,
Amsterdam
Mike.
come morning
We get it.
with 16
We
hours
read
to
it.
kill
We get it.
before I had to be training the Dutch employees. Maybe I would take a trip down to one of the coffee shops in the Red Lake District and really let my hair down. No, I wouldn't do that. I would see the area of the city
Yeah,
from the bus
play deck
as
of
I went
box.
to the hotel, where I would eat at the hotel restaurant and drink sparkling water. So I'd better enjoy the gummy bears, my one extravagance to commemorate my break from routine. I joined the queue at the KLM line, which was mercifully short, most likely because all the passengers for my flight had already been checked through, as the flight was scheduled to depart in an hour. I checked my watch again, frowned, and absentmindedly opened the bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears and began to munch on them as the line slowly advanced. To be fair, they tasted fine, just like any other manufacturer's brand of colorful candy, and they were sugar-free to boot. This is what made the whole incident that followed so baffling. If they tasted off or different, I most likely wouldn't have continued to shovel them into my mouth absent-mindedly while daydreaming about what to order to eat from room service in my hotel in
Can I
Amsterdam.
breathe?
So I gave my attendant my e-ticket and she weighed my bags.
Oh my
The
god.
first of the pains began in my stomach. I thought nothing of it at first, chalking it up to the fact that I needed something more substantial than gummy bears to tackle my hunger. But over the course of the next 5 minutes, the shooting pain began to come in more rapid succession. At this point, I had my boarding pass printed, and rubbing my stomach a little, I proceeded to security. I briefly entertained the thought of trying to find a restroom before going through security, but at that point, my discomfort was manageable, and I didn't think it would get any worse. Certainly not within the amount of time it would take to clear security. I joined the line and started fishing for my passport to present to the agent checking tickets. I felt a thin sheen of sweat break out of my forehead and underarms, and my features flushed for a moment as the wave of heat washed over me. Didn't take much heat as going through security always caused me great anxiety, and I chalked it up to pre-flight jitters. It was only as I stood face to face with the agent and handed her my passport and ticket that I had a glimpse of the agony that was about to begin. I felt my tongue wrinkled for a moment, as if my consciousness buckled, so intense was the pain that fired through my bowels. I grimaced spastically and emitted a low moan, and felt myself take an involuntary step sideways. Stars shot through my head briefly, and my vision blurred and then snapped back into focus. The agent was staring at me with slight consternation and asked me if I was all right. I pulled myself together, stood straight, and declared I was fine, mortified that I had a lapse in decorum not only in public, but at the security clearance in an airport. As I fumbled off my belt to go through the metal detector, the pain in my stomach increased as I practically had to sit on the floor to take my shoes off, terrified of what would happen if I bent at the metal to do it. It was becoming increasingly more evident to me that this wasn't just a stomachache. No, this was something much worse. As a child, I had a bout of diarrhea after a trip to Mexico with my family, and I remember the feeling of nausea that swept through me before my child self had surrendered to the gas pains and parked myself on the toilet for an hour, shitting until I felt like I didn't have any bones left. And that was how I was feeling now, with several key differences. The pain was worse. The sense of impending bowel movement was so formidable it gave me temporary amnesia, and it took all of my willpower, all of it, to clench my butt cheeks together to prevent my sphincter from imploding. A sudden shock of pain racked my body, and I half wondered if I was going to give birth to a Tasmanian devil. The crazy, fear-inducing image of said cartoon animal chasing Bugs Bunny through the splashy, volcanic shit kettle that was my stomach caused me to elicit a short, maniacal bark of laughter as I approached the metal detector. A wild, distant look in my eyes, sweat now beginning to pour off of me like a long-distance runner in Kenya. The security agent on the other side of the detector shot a quick glance over to her co-worker, who narrowed his eyes and made a subtle movement towards his holster. My breathing became uneven as I entered the metal detector and realized with alarm that I had taken off my socks without even registering it, and one of my coattails was untucked at the front. I held my breath,
Yo,
my eyes
how?
bulging
Explain.
dangerously from my head as the machine scanned me. As I shakily moved forward towards the agent for a pat-down, my stomach began to elicit sounds that can only be described as otherworldly. It started off a sort of bubbling sound, heard from afar, and grew in pitch and intensity at an alarming rate. My jaw dropped in shock at what I can only describe as the sound of an agonized, wailing alley cat in heat with a persistent Doppler effect added to its voice emitted
What?
from some nether region of my intestines. The officer's eyes widened in alarm, and she kept her eyes glued to my stomach as she thoroughly patted me down. As she reached my shins, I felt my innards suddenly expand and plummet toward my rectum. With cat-like reflexes, I squeezed my sphincter shut with what seemed like nanoseconds to spare, and I knew that if I didn't get to a bathroom in a minute, I would shit myself. With a Herculean effort and all the strength that I could muster, I forced my butt cheeks together, knowing that one false move would open the floodgates. As I began to walk like a duck, trying to remain inconspicuous as possible, not even caring how other people were seeing in front of them, a disheveled, barefoot 40-year-old businessman, red-faced and bulgy-eyed, sweating profusely, shaking slightly, and walking without bending his knees. With a single-minded intensity, I grabbed my carry-on, shoes, and socks from the plastic tub that had passed the X-ray inspection, and without putting anything back on, I turned on my heels with the intention of finding the nearest restroom and slowly diving in, one squirt at a time. But that's not what happened. I turned to go and found myself staring at 3 armed agents who stopped me and asked me if I would follow them. Why? What's the matter? I stammered, wincing slightly, as the act of speech seemed to strain the strenuous, extremely fragile truth I had negotiated between my bowels and the tempest that raged within. I have to go to the bathroom right now, I pleaded. Just follow us, please, they said, leaving no room for argument. The other travelers, clearing the security check, stared with curiosity and revulsion at the spectacle unfolding before them, whispering amongst themselves and hurrying to pack up their belongings and get as far away from me as possible. No doubt assuming that the airport had nabbed some sort of domestic terrorist. If I hadn't been so feverishly trying to hold back the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, I likely would have died of shame. With each step I took towards the room they ushered me into, I felt that my legs would give way. I marveled at how strong the human will could be, marveled at what essentially patching a hole in the Hoover Dam with bubblegum could actually be sustained indefinitely. Maybe I could make it through this ordeal after all. The room they brought me into was an examination room. I had pretty much stopped registering details of my environment as my consciousness closed off all but the absolutely necessary functions: breathing, ability to walk. But I snapped back into reality when I heard the sound of rubber. The slow dancing of realization poked through my agony, and stoic resolve as I turned to face an agent donning rubber gloves. Sir, we are going to perform a cavity search on you. A young, fresh-faced agent stared in a firm but emotionless voice. His short-cropped blonde hair was immaculate, and for a crazy moment I wondered if he was an actor and this was all sort of some elaborate practical joke done to amuse bored kids watching YouTube. He must have taken my tortured silence for resistance, because he looked at me sharply and said, "Lower your pants and underwear, please," and faced the desk. Panic started to grip me in its icy grasp, and the sudden adrenaline threatened to destroy my sphincter bulwarks and render my anus in two. I inhaled sharply with a pained gasp. I doubled up on my efforts to clench my cheeks together. "Sir, please," I begged, deferring to the kid in an act of desperation. "I have to go to the bathroom. You can follow me into the stall if you need to, but I had some bad Haribo sugars from gummy bears, and now I feel like..." But they had stopped listening and smirked at each other. 2 of the other agents, a tall, dark-haired female and a shorter, balding fat man, looked away from me, and I could see them shaking a little as they stifled their laughs. "Sir, please face the wall, put your hands on the desk, and spread your cheeks," the young agent stated, a lopsided grin on his face, but I began to protest, and the fresh shock of pain forced me to stop and lean on the table for support as an ungodly howling noise from my stomach, something between the dying moans of a woolly mammoth and the sound of the bubble wrap popping underwater. I exhaled shakily, and my focus began to narrow as I rallied for the final battle. Shaking uncontrollably and sweat literally raining down onto the tabletop in front of me, I turned to face a wall and heard a meek childlike voice pleading from somewhere in the room, "Please," and then it said it again, "Please," from somewhere within me. My mind recognized that this sound had been issued from me, although my consciousness had now begun to separate from my body, and I held my breath and prayed to God for strength. "He probably has some heroin or something that opened up there," a female guard said, as part of me that hadn't escaped into the ether yet acknowledged that she was behind me and to my left, probably high as a kite. "Look at him," she said. The shorter guard agreed with a snort off to my right. "Spread your cheeks," the agent said, his voice directly behind me and lower than the other two. "And bend over." "Please God, please God, please God, please God," I whispered in a desperate, maniacal mantra, not even aware of my surroundings anymore. I felt like I was lost in an opium fog, with half-snatched images and sounds filtering through to create a nonsensical version of reality. Another volley of pain tore through me, and I involuntarily leaned forward over the desk, my focus completely narrowed now to a spot on the wall 2 feet in front of me, a curious imperfection in the what seemed to be whitewashed stone wall. It was a dark blotch about 5 millimeters long and shaped like a smiling bear. A yellow, dancing bear. No, a green bear. No, red. It was all the colors of the rainbow. My God, it was beautiful. It just took something as simple as a slight breeze to trigger Armageddon. That's all. No trumpets, no fanfare, no fire raining from the heavens, no dogs and cats living together in harmony, no finger on the button, no prophet to predict, no nothing. As I stared at the rainbow bear smiling and dancing in front of me, my mouth agape, drooling, eyes glazed and bloodshot, face coated with the sheen of sweat, I heard the softest sound, an exhalation from the young agent behind me, and then, at the same instant, the warm air of his breath feather across my butt cheeks. For just a moment, maybe less, maybe a split second, even a nanosecond, I felt the presence of God there with me in the room as neurons began to misfire at a blinding rate.
I can't.
Nerve-ending
I
bristles
literally
and
cannot
muscles
attack you.
twitched reflexively. I stood on the brink, with one foot hovering over the edge, and then without taking a step, I found myself plummeting. With the sound like an extra-large plastic ketchup bottle being run over by a Mack truck, my sphincter released. The pressure of the blast pushed me hard into the desk, and the legs of the desk screeched as they scraped across the floor. My body remained rigid for a moment, and I had experienced a relief that can only be described as orgasmic in its purity. My eyes rolled back into my head, and my tongue lolled out of my head like a dog as I emitted a low, sustained groan that grew in pitch as the filthy torrent pushed its way out of my body. Tremors racked my body, and I must have looked like a fish out of water with an endless stream of shit firing out of its ass. Other sounds and sensations started to filter in now as my consciousness began to materialize once more. The muffled screams of a dungeon filled with prisoners near death radiated from my stomach, the rushing sound of liters of liquid trying to escape through an aperture too small to accommodate all of it at the same time, the omnipresent sound of chunky liquid splattering against a hard surface with great force, and the high-pitched screaming of a woman's voice calling out to God, another sobbing uncontrollably, imploring to make it stop, and my own ecstatic, monotone wail. When my ordeal had eventually run its course, I was left panting for breath and
I don't
wobbly-legged,
know why you should
half
keep
crying,
trying.
half laughing with
There's
relief,
nothing like it.
barely lucid, and the feeling as if I had
Sometimes
birthed
just
an
empty and
elephant.
come to me.
My colon felt like someone had poured chili sauce all over it and then sent it in a colony of fire ants to eat it. Through my sobs, I heard the sound of dripping, like when the sprinklers are eventually turned off, or after an office fire, or after a thunderstorm when the willow that overhangs a pond continues to rain down long after the sky has stopped. From behind me, the sobbing continued, and I heard someone trying to speak into a walkie-talkie, but nonsensical words were all that the man could speak, which sounded like ravings of a lunatic. With great relief, I slowly pulled myself off of the table, legs trembling, my stomach eliciting one last sound, a loud, prolonged gas bubbling that eerily resembled a pig orgasm. I slowly turned my head to survey the devastation, and in that instant, if I had had a pencil or some other sharp object, I probably would have gouged my eyes out in revulsion. And the smell was enough to drive a man insane. It was the stench of rotting.
I'm back.
Rotting potatoes mixed with sulfur and ammonia, cooked in a broth of chicken feces and left to age for 2 weeks in a yeasty stew at the bottom of a French outhouse. After half a whiff of this ghoulish brine, I immediately stopped breathing through my nose, but to taste was the remain in the back of my throat for months to come. The young agent had taken the brunt of the foul witch's brew, and at first I couldn't possess what I was seeing. I thought somehow the young blonde kid had been spirited away and replaced by a brown golem, or a ATV rider that had spent the better part of a day through every mud puddle he could find after a torrential downpour. With some degree of compartmentalization, I came to understand that for some unfathomable reason, this kid hadn't moved, or hadn't been able to move, through the entire fecal deluge. He had weathered the entire assault head on, like some sort of hero from Greek mythology. I had given this poor schmuck a one-man ship bukkake that had made a Brazilian photographer retch in disgust. And he was still in the same position he must have been from the moment of first impact. I tried to comprehend how he must be feeling, what he must be going through psychologically, but it became evident very quickly that he had become very broken, no doubt forced so deeply within himself once the fire hose had been turned on that there was little to no hope of him ever coming back from it, certainly not without extensive psychotherapy or a lobotomy. I looked beyond his quivering, catatonic, crouched form to see a perfect outline of him cut out in the white wall behind him, either side filled in a dripping, opaque layer of alternatively pulpy and runny fecal stew. I noticed two quivering masses at either extremes of the room and realized they were humanoid in form, although the caterwailing that was coming from these broken creatures was just blubbering
Alright, mate.
gibberish.
I get
And
it. You're
this
good
was
at
the
the game.
taboo
Wow,
that was
so good,
burnt
buddy.
into my mind's
Mine's
eye
bad.
for eternity.
Let me just go, buddy.
Needless to
Alright.
say, I missed my
I'll go with
flight.
that.
In fact, the next week is a blur. I have vague recollections of an army of hazmat-clad figures looming through the brown landscape of the soiled room. The slopping sounds of rubber boots squelching in puddles, and uncontrollable wailing and animal-like sounds issuing from the mouth of creatures that had been traumatized beyond their capacity for being put back together. The complete loss of sensation from my waist down as I was rolled through the room on a waterproof gurney, its wheels struggling to surf on top of the shit-soaked floor. I spent a week or so in hospital enclosed in a well-ventilated sealed room with suited doctors coming in on the hour to monitor my vital signs as they tried to rehydrate my body. I had apparently expelled every available drop of water from my body that was possible to sustain life without a short period of time. All of my clothes were incinerated in the hospital's crematorium, and the soiled bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears was never recovered. This is my story. It is inconceivable to think that this kind of product can be sold legally and be misrepresented as food. I was lucky. I survived. But as for families of the survivors and the survivors themselves, they will forever live with the trauma of the events that took place at Pearson International Airport on that snowy day in April 2013. And so, friends, that brings us to the end of the story of the
One day I
Haribo
just listened to
sugar-free gummy bears. If you guys enjoyed this story, make sure to leave this video a like. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And God help me if I ever have to read another Amazon review quite like this again. Although knowing me, give it about 3 months. So thank you guys for watching this video. I love you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.
Alright, cool. We're based on. This is important. Interesting. Anyways. happened to purple? Yeah, I'm inhabiting the spaces, man. One must be realistic here. Nobody cares. Alright, man. I can just do that. Jesus, I've never seen someone more like. What? How did you not? Oh my god. Why? Why didn't they just shoot him off? And why did that other one not hit?
From one more cup of coffee, I think, sums up what really bothers me about Damsel pretty well. One cup gives them more credit than I do, honestly. It's not an anti. Today's corporate casket was sponsored by Daily Harvest. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now, this is a video I have wanted to make for a while now. I don't really know what took me so long, especially since you guys so obviously know on the channel that I would not be a fan of flat earthers, but I don't know, it just took me a while, I guess. The other part was that I really did not want to approach this video as a joke because let me tell you, I want to so badly, but I really have to try and give this a fair shake just like I would any other organization. This is not a video to make fun of people that are objectively delusional or willingly misguided. This video is to explore why people believe what they do and how some groups of cultish mindsets can become so set in their ways that there's no amount of truth that can convince them otherwise. And yeah, there is obviously bound to be a few awkward laughs here and there because I don't think I'm going to be able to be 100% serious when talking about this. So today we are going to finally be talking about the Flat Earth Society. Ever since I saw the Netflix documentary Behind the Curve in 2018, I've always been curious about Flat Earth. Now, as a concept, it's pretty laughable, but as a group, now, the thing is, for those of you that have not seen the documentary, there's a lot of like different smaller groups in the whole flat earth belief system, and it encompasses a whole lot more than just the earth is flat. It's often more complicated than that because when you have one massive belief that's so easily debunked, it takes other beliefs and strange reasoning to support the theory. Like, you know what I mean? Now, I realize I'm getting a little ahead of myself and I'm pretty ready to jump the gun on this, but let's go ahead and start with where modern flat earth societies even came from.
Yeah. Make dealing with that.
So, these modern flat earth societies began with a man named Samuel Rowbotham. Mark Sargent, as featured in the Netflix documentary, which is, by the way, someone who's emailed me before when I've poked fun at flat earth. And yes, Mark, I've seen the documentary, and no, Mark, it did not change my mind. I think you're still a little loopy, but let's keep going. Now, Mark Sargent was featured in a Netflix documentary that is widely seen as one of the modern leaders of Flat Earth, and we will get to him because, you know, I got a bit invested in this, but for all the wrong reasons, really. Now, while he is considered like the modern leader of the Flat Earth Society, Samuel, born in 1816, he was like an English inventor and writer, and he wrote a book called Zetetic Astronomy. He's the guy that's considered to be kind of like the founder of these beliefs. He's also created such stunning works such as Earth Not a Globe under the pseudonym Parallax. And no, by the way, he was not an astronomer, though he used the Zetetic astronomy as he referred to it. And that basically just models the Earth as an enclosed plane centered at the North Pole and bound by walls of ice at the perimeter. You guys have probably seen this memed on way too many times, but this is kind of where it came from. Now, according to Samuel, we're all living in some sort of terrarium like environment, and this is what many flat earthers actually believe today, and it's also what Mark Sargent states that he believes at the beginning of Behind the Curve. The big question here, obviously, is why?
Like,
Why did Samuel believe this, and how could his beliefs gain so much traction that they're still used today when they're so unbelievably unbelievable? Well, this is due to at least partially the Bedford level experiment. Samuel argued that if the Earth is a globe, it should, of course, curve in some places. There was a canal in England called the Old Bedford that he used for experiments. This canal is 20 miles in length and passes in a straight line. The water is nearly stationary, which I guess to Samuel proved that the Earth was flat, because a long canal was stationary, and that means that the Earth is not a globe. The funny thing here is that at first, no one really believed him. He got very little attention overall. It wasn't until in 1870 a supporter by the name of John Hampden offered a wager that he could prove the Earth was flat that people started to care. A naturalist and qualified surveyor, Alfred Russel Wallace, took that bet, and here's what happened according to Scientific American. In January of 1870, Alfred Russel Wallace found himself on a collision course with a group of creationists who fervently believe the Earth is flat. The father of biogeography, co-discoverer of the theory of evolution by natural selection, seems an unlikely sort to be mixed in with religious fanatics on a question of geography settled in the 3rd century BC. Why was such a
I'm
venerable
waiting for this guy to
19th
question
century
me.
man of science accepting wagers from flat earthers regarding the shape of our planet? Simply put, it looked like easy money. Charles Darwin and Charles Lyell ignored the bet, but it's worth noting here that Wallace at the time had a quote, open, trusting nature and perpetual near poverty, end quote. So it doesn't seem like Wallace was just trying to openly mock them. He was just honestly down to win an
I like
easy
how you
bet.
guys just gave up on
And at first it was easy money. He did win the bet after all. He set a straight line 13 feet above the water and added poles in the middle that could be used to see the curvature. And, since like the earth isn't flat, Wallace won. But Samuel and Hampton were pissed. Apparently, Hampton threatened to kill him, and Wallace was later criticized by his peers for his involvement in a bet to decide the most fundamental and established of scientific facts. In other words, other scientists told him he was stupid for even humoring these people. Wallace wrote about his experience with Hampton and Samuel later, stating that the matter cost me 15 years of continued worry, litigation, and persecution, with the final loss of several £100. And it was all brought upon me by my own ignorance and my own fault. Ignorance of the facts so well shown by the late Professor de Morgan that paradoxers, as he termed them, can never be convinced, and my fault in wishing to get money by any kind of wager. It constitutes, therefore, the most regrettable incident of my life. And I really feel like this is a crucial part of the story. The thing is, I try to encourage healthy debate on this channel. Some things are pretty black and white, but there are many topics or situations that fall into a gray area here, and that's why I want your opinions in the first place. Whether it's about what consequences someone might face after taking part in criminal activity or things of that nature. I'm a firm believer in civil discussion with everyone because everyone deserves to be heard, right? Well, I'm not sure. Not anymore, that is. Because the thing is, Wallace took up a bet that Hampton offered, proved on their terms that the Earth was curved, and he still received death threats for it. Some people simply cannot be reasoned with and cannot be debated, so I'm not saying that every single flat earther is like that, but I guess my unfortunate point here is just don't try to prove a point to people and debate people that are so close-minded that they would rather threaten your life than hear you out. But anyway, despite the evidence, the idea of the Earth being flat caught on with some people during that era somehow. The International Flat Earth Research Society of America continued to grow out of these beliefs. Samuel Rowbotham at first called them the Universal Zetetic Society before the name was changed. A different Samuel, Samuel Shenton, led the society before he died in 1972 and passed the leadership to Charles Johnson, who died in 2001. Charles Johnson apparently believed in flat Earth because an elementary school teacher failed to explain to him the concept of gravity in a way he could understand. His wife, Marjorie, also believed in a flat Earth because she did not hang from her toes when she was in Australia, and I'm not bullshitting you. That's legitimately her reasoning why.
Bro, can
It
we get
seems
some
like the
IQ people
Johnsons
in
were
here?
just taught gravity in some kind of simplified way, or maybe a way that just didn't quite make sense to them, and they just decided, well, that's it. We're never going to ask any more questions again, and that's final. Now, for a while, the Flat Earth Society died down a bit. They never completely vanished, but things were quiet. When Johnson passed and his wife, who managed the membership database, also passed, it seemed like the group may have finally had the opportunity to fade out. And that is until Daniel Shenton got involved. And no, he's actually not related to Samuel Shenton from before. I guess Shenton is just a common last name among Flat Earth Society leaders. In 2004, Daniel issued a press release for the Flat Earth Society opening to new members, and here's what it had to
Alright,
say.
say goodbye to
The
your bed
Flat
buddy.
Earth Society is officially launching its new website and opening membership to new members for the first time since 2001. The website, now online at www.theflatearthsociety.org, features the largest public collection of flat earth literature in the world, as well as a comprehensive user-edited encyclopedia
I
and a
don't care if I
thriving
die now.
online discussion forum with
Goodbye.
over half a
Everybody's getting
million
lost.
messages.
At least you're
The
probably nerfed
official
the
launch of the
macron.
website marks an
That,
important
because they just
transition
nerfed it
for the
way too
Flat Earth
far.
Society. Traditionally, the Flat Earth Society has communicated with its members through printed
Anyways,
newsletters such as the Earth Not a Globe Review and Flat Earth News. Technology has moved on, and we are thrilled to be able to reach a much broader audience with our message, Flat Earth Society President Daniel Shenton said. The internet is an amazing tool for communication. The Flat Earth Forums, a web message board run by the Society, has gathered over 16,000 users and half a million messages before its launch in 2004. Although membership in the Society went through a period of decline in the late 1990s, there has recently been a resurgence in interest, according to Shenton. In the past 2 years, there have been major books published about the Flat Earth movement, as well as articles on the BBC website and Fox News, which included interviews with one of the Society's most prominent members, James McIntyre. According to him, the myth of globularism has been proselytized for centuries by the scientific establishment. We seek to challenge that dogma. Shenton adds, I think we're capturing the public's imagination, and that's very important. I realize that our views are still considered highly unorthodox, but people are beginning to ask questions, and that's the first step in a long process of truth seeking. Other countries like Canada and Italy have their own history of flat Earth, so I'm not going to get into all of it, but I do want to explain why I think this growth is happening. The thing is, believe it or not, Mark Sargent from Behind the Curve explains it best, which, but here we go. He says that the reason why we're winning is because science throws a lot of numbers at you, whereas I can point and say, there's Seattle, you shouldn't be able to see it from here. He's in his mom's backyard, pointing across a body of water to the city skyline. The thing is, I think most of us watching can easily debunk Mark. Yes, the Earth is a globe, but it's gradual too. The reason he can see Seattle is because the Earth curves somewhere between 8 inches per mile. So Seattle, which isn't that far away from Mark's mother's home, isn't going to just disappear behind the Earth's curvature as Mark states it would. But the thing is, Mark is right about one thing. It sounds simpler, initially. When you get into all
I
the
love how this guy has
convoluted
a full
conspiracies that you
that's
have to
insane,
believe,
scary. Oh my
like the
god,
faked
powerful.
moon landing
And
and
I'm
things
over
of
here
that
with
nature, in
just
order to
what
make
I have.
flat Earth make sense, then yes, it all kind of starts to fall apart. But at first glance, to people who struggle with the concept of gravity, yes, it does seem like an easy explanation. And I'm not trying to sound mean by saying this, but I think that someone who can't understand gravity or very, very, very basic science is probably more likely to fall down this rabbit hole and insist how right they are, dig their heels in, and say that the rest of the world is wrong, as opposed to recognizing, like, hey, these basic scientific concepts are either too advanced for me or weren't explained to me properly. There are most certainly things in my childhood that were explained to me very simply, and as an adult, I learned the complexities behind them or just went into my own rabbit hole down it because I was still interested. But, hey, I guess not everyone does that. Anyway,
Goodbye,
today
Jay.
what I would like to do is go over some of the concepts that Flat Earth
You're not
does
going to win
believe,
this fight.
aside from the obvious the Earth is flat
Yeah.
terminology. They have their
Going to
evidence,
my
and
bed.
there's massive air quotes here on the evidence portion, to support this, and I want to kind of pick it apart bit by bit and disprove a lot of the misconceptions behind this flat Earth theory. I've heard before that plenty of people, according to Mark Sargent, end up believing in flat Earth because they struggle to debunk it. So let's debunk it together.
Okay.
Now, as many of you guys
Let me
know,
just get
it's
some
the
arrows
new
and
year
start.
and it's time to refocus on taking care of yourself. And today's sponsor, Daily Harvest, is making that just a little bit easier. Daily Harvest is a company that is delivering delicious food built on organic fruits and vegetables right to your door. My favorite thing from them is smoothies right now. I'm addicted to smoothies. I love them. They're so easy to just make
What
and
happened?
consume. They have a chocolate blueberry one that is literally just chef's kiss here. It's blueberries, bananas, spinach, almond, cacao, maca. It's so good. But they also have like strawberry and peach, mint and
Actually,
cacao.
I would
There's
just
like
end it
so
there because I
many
don't feel like
variations
playing
here
anymore
of things for you to
Bad
try.
Wars.
And they have smoothies, flatbreads, they have bowls and soups as
Really,
well. And the
prepare for
thing
like
that's
a
really
big one.
important to
Like,
me is they don't
like
use
gonna need a
preservatives,
ton of
added
health packs. It's
sugar,
gonna
or
be like the
artificial
final
anything. And they
battle.
just launched their first ever plant-based milk
They kind of
collection,
just
starting with almond milk.
died.
Daily
So
Harvest milk is made of only
I'll see you
almonds and a
guys
dash
in
of
the
sea
next
salt.
video,
That's
I
it.
guess.